Today, I want to share with you a story, one of many I have written in my past while I was in a more creative mood one day. I think you all will like. So please relax, have a listen, enjoy the gameplay. If you like what I do, please give me a like. Comment what kind of story you would like to hear next, and don't forget to subscribe. The darkness in hell was not like the darkness of the world above. This darkness was alive, breathing, watching. It clung to him like wet skin, sinking into his pores, filling his lungs until every breath tasted of sulfur and ash. It had been this way since the moment he arrived, if arrival was the right word for falling. He remembered that fall, the way it tore at him, his body weightless and then impossibly heavy, the screams of 1,000 voices rising to meet him. The moment he hit the ground, the pain was immediate and consuming, a fire that started in his bones and spread outward. He thought the agony would end, but it didn't. It never did. James Calloway, or whatever was left of him, wandered through the endless wasteland, his bare feet dragging across the jagged, searing ground. The air was thick, heavy with smoke that carried faint cries and whispers, voices calling his name from the shadows. The shadows moved like oil slicks, shifting and spreading, watching him with something that wasn't quite eyes. "James!" a voice whispered, soft and venomous, slipping into his ear like a blade. He froze, every muscle locking in place. His breath hitched, and his eyes darted to the darkness pooling near his feet. It always started this way. The voice came again, and this time it was louder. "Why did you do it, James?" He didn't respond. He didn't dare. "You thought you could run from it, didn't you?" Another voice now, male, deeper, colder. It came from behind him. "I didn't mean," James began, his voice hoarse and desperate, but he was cut off by laughter, cruel, jagged, like the tearing of flesh. "Didn't mean to?" the voices hissed, rising around him like a storm. "Tell that to the people you destroyed. Tell that to the ones who begged for mercy." The shadows surged forward, forming shapes, figures. He recognized them instantly, and his stomach twisted into a knot. There was Victoria, her eyes hollowed out, black tears carving rivers down her face. Her once beautiful lips were pulled back into a snarl, revealing teeth that were far too sharp. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for him, skeletal fingers tipped with claws. "You took everything from me," she rasped, her voice trembling with rage. "Everything." "No," James whispered, backing away. His feet slipped on the molten ground, and the heat burned his flesh, but he didn't care. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," she spat, her voice rising to a shriek. Another figure emerged from the darkness. This one was worse, far worse. It was Daniel, the young assistant James had mentored or pretended to. Daniel had trusted him, admired him, and James had repaid that trust with a knife to the back. A career destroyed, a life unraveled. Daniel had taken his own life a week later. His face was wrong now, half decayed, maggots writhing where his eyes should have been. His jaw hung loose, his words a wet, gurgling sound. "You ruined me," he growled, stepping closer, dragging a broken leg behind him. "You left me with nothing." "I didn't mean for you to die," James choked out, tears streaming down his face. "You pulled the trigger," Daniel hissed, "not with a gun, but with your lies, your betrayal." James turned to run, but the ground beneath him shifted, the cracks widening, molten rivers spilling up and around him like fiery chains. The figures followed, their voices growing louder, overlapping, screaming his sins into the air. "You stole from me. You betrayed me. You destroyed me." They reached him then, their hands clawing at his flesh. Their nails were sharp, tearing deep, peeling away skin and muscle, exposing nerves that screamed with white-hot pain. They dragged him to the ground, pinning him as the fire rose higher. "You thought you could escape us, James?" Victoria snarled, her face inches from his. Her breath was acrid, her tongue black and forked. "You thought a single bullet would make it all go away?" "I just wanted it to stop," James sobbed. The guilt, the voices, it was too much. Her laughter was cruel and hollow. "You don't know what guilt is." They tore into him then, their hands plunging into his chest, pulling at organs, ripping at bone. He screamed, but no sound escaped. The fire consumed him, filling his mouth, his eyes, his ears, until all that was left was darkness. And then he was whole again. He opened his eyes, his body restored unscarred, but the pain lingered, phantom wounds that throbbed and burned. The landscape around him was the same as always, an endless expanse of cracked earth and roiling skies. The figures were gone, but their voices remained, whispering just beneath the surface of his mind. He stood, his legs trembling, and began to walk. He didn't know why. There was nowhere to go. He tried to piece together the fragments of his life, the choices that had led him here. The deal with Victoria, the betrayal of Daniel, the countless others he had stepped on, discarded, destroyed. He had done it all for power, for wealth, for the illusion of control. But the weight of it had grown too heavy. The faces of the people he'd wronged haunted him day and night, their voices filling every quiet moment. He thought death would be an escape. He was wrong. In hell there was no escape. As he walked, the whispers grew louder, forming words, sentences, accusations. They came from the cracks in the ground, from the air itself, from inside his own head. Why do you deserve peace? You'll never escape us. Feel what we felt, James, over and over and over again. His knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, his hands clawing at his face. "I'm sorry," he screamed. "I'm sorry." But there was no one to hear him. The shadows began to shift again, the figures rising once more, their faces twisted into masks of rage and pain. They surrounded him, their hands reaching, their voices screaming. And as they dragged him down into the molten depths again, he realized the truth. This wasn't punishment. This was justice. And it would never end.